at which we had Polly Billington, Paul Novak, Sarah Longlands, and Steve Rotherham. So it's always a bit weird doing this on Zoom. If anybody would like to disagree with the minutes, say now or forever hold your peace.
No.
Right, I'm going to take those as agreed then. Thank you very much, everybody. And we'll move straight away onto the AGM. Now, I think that we should be quorate. That we only need
5.
We only need
5.
5. Indeed, yeah. And by my count, we've got 5. So that's fine. So with regards to election of officers, at least one of the officers must be from the party of government, which we do have. None of the members have indicated that they don't want to continue in their current role, with the exception of myself, who's standing down as chair. So that all those who are vice chair, secretaries and treasurers can be successfully re-elected. But before we do that, obviously I've been chair for the past few years and it's been a great honour and a pleasure, and working with colleagues has been wonderful. Having gone back on the front bench, it's probably better to have a backbencher in the role. And I'm very pleased to say that Kim Johnson has indicated that she would be interested in picking up the role as chair. We haven't had any other colleagues indicate that they would be. So can I propose that as chair of the all-party group, can I propose Kim Johnson?
Seconded.
Any other suggestions? No, in that case, unless anybody wants to indicate now, we'll take that as agreed. Kim Johnson as our new chair. Thank you, colleagues. And similarly, unless anybody wants to disagree, we'll just re-elect previous officers.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Fantastic. Thanks, colleagues. So now, can I just check, Steve, are we having Steve Rotherham first on the budget?
That was the plan. I don't know if he's actually here. Yes, that was the plan. No, I think
let me check if we've got a Metro Mayor with us. If not, we'll just move on to the next item and Steve can pop in as.
I know he has to leave early at 1.
Yeah.
I thought he would be here, but he's obviously a little bit delayed. So yeah.
Okay, well, come to you in that case then, and we'll just take Steve as and when he's available.
Will do. Thanks, Ali. And I just wanted to extend my thanks to you, and I'm sure the whole of the APPG, in terms of being a great chair for the last couple of years, and wish you all the best on the front bench. And would like to thank everybody for supporting me as the new chair, and hope I can be a worthy replacement. So we have some 4 great speakers talking about building back better. So, and I'd like to first maybe introduce Dame Judith Hackett, Chair of Make UK. And Dame Judith is the Chair of Make UK, formerly the Engineering Employers Federation. And I'd like to invite Judith to speak for 7 minutes, please, Judith, if that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I will try my very best to keep to time, and thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the invitation to join you this morning. I am, of course, as the chair of Make UK, going to focus on manufacturing, and I will talk about the general state of manufacturing and also on what we see in the Northwest in particular. As I'm sure you are all very much aware, one of the things that I think has happened as part of the pandemic is that the importance of manufacturing has come to the fore, and the need for a strong manufacturing base in the UK as part of building back better has never been clearer. From the time that the pandemic hit, manufacturers up and down the UK have been involved in things like the Ventilator Challenge. They've repurposed their businesses, they've turned over their facilities, making lots of other things, new things like PPE, disinfectants, sanitizers, and even the vaccines themselves. So I think we've had it underlined for us just how important manufacturing is. The budget last week has provided us with some mixed messages, some good news, and some things that continue to concern us. The positive announcements undoubtedly were the extension of JRS, support for innovation, measures to boost investment, all of those things really, really important for our sector. But I guess some of the disappointment for us was around very little mention of net zero, and also disappointment around the change in government message regarding the industrial strategy. So those are things that remain a concern for us. And I'm going to talk specifically now about net zero and the green agenda, because for us in manufacturing, that's becoming increasingly important. We've been discussing net zero with all of our members in Make UK. They understand the challenges, and also, I think, crucially, what huge important opportunities exist in seizing the net zero agenda and the green agenda. They see lots of opportunities and they want to see this reflected in government policy. Nearly half of our manufacturers are saying that infrastructure projects focusing on green energy should be prioritised as a way of supporting manufacturing. But it's also important, we think, that manufacturers themselves are encouraged to invest in green technologies. So for us, this is about pulling the right economic levers for green policy. And this is something we think has not yet been given enough priority as we emerge from the COVID crisis, because it's clear to us, I think, and to all of us probably on this call, that the future is not the same as the past. During the last 12 months, our economy has shifted, and anyone who thinks we're going to go back to how it was, as opposed to build on this new platform, building back better and greener, and on a digital basis, all of those things have to be incorporated in what we do as we go forward. People and skills will be crucial. And we're working on that in Make UK. I'm also working with other business sectors through the Business Action Council on what skills need to look like for the future. We think it's really important that government puts emphasis behind that need to encourage the right skills. And by that, we mean digital and we mean green skills. We think it's an agenda that will attract young people into the industry. So this absolutely ties with needing to get more people into manufacturing. Young people are very much in tune with digital, they're in tune with the green agenda. And if we are clear that that is integral to building back better, it will help to encourage more people into the sector. One of the things that we've been pushing for is a national skills task force. We've been pushing hard for that to government. I'm sorry to say that's had little traction with government, but industry itself has now formed that national skills task force. I couldn't finish without mentioning apprenticeships. Apprenticeships have gone down. We need to work hard to build them back. And we also need to build green skills into that. Finally, I just want to say that I've come to this meeting direct from Make UK's national membership board this morning. So hot off the press, I can tell you what all of our manufacturing regions around the country are saying. The position in the Northwest is one of cautious optimism. Our members are reporting that their order books are filling, but they are still challenged by the recovery from COVID and also the transition out of Brexit. Brexit is not over, it's not behind us. The transition arrangements are still proving challenging, particularly around things like exporting, and you will have seen the data today on how the level of exports has dropped in January. So those are the key issues for us. We think there is cause for optimism. We think there's great opportunity in building back better and greener and more digital. But we do need to have more overt support from government for that agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith, for sharing that with us. And I think you raised some really important points, particularly in terms of how manufacturing has changed to adapt to the needs. You mentioned about young people, apprenticeships, and green and digital skills, which are really, really important going forward. So thank you. And we'll take groups of questions after all of the speakers have finished their presentations. And I'd just like to hand over to Andrew O'Brien, Director of Social Enterprise UK. Thank you, Andrew. Over to you. 7 minutes. And you did really well, Judith. You did it in less than 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for inviting Social Enterprise UK to speak here today. Liverpool is and the City Region is a hub of social enterprise activity, and we mean that to be businesses that trade for a social or environmental purpose. They generate profits and surpluses, and they then reinvest those profits and surpluses back into the communities and the causes that they've been set up to support. And Liverpool City Region is home to a number of very successful social enterprises in the green agenda. Some of you might be aware of the FRC group running bulky bobs in the area, taking disused furniture and turning that into selling that on to companies to get that reuse and recycling work, but also donating large amounts of much needed furniture to lower income households so they can have the beds and the chairs and the sofas and the tables that they need. So that's an example of that business model in action. I would say that people in the Liverpool City Region are, is a real hub of social entrepreneurship. The people of Liverpool and the region, care about social justice. They care about social causes. They want their businesses to be responsible, and it's no surprise that it's a real hub of entrepreneurship in our sector. And I think, something that government I think needs to recognise is that we can't have a very southern view of the economy where it's all about narrow profit-generating businesses, ignoring the fantastic work of social enterprises, cooperatives, community businesses, which have often had their foundations and roots in the north of England and have really helped to transform lives and empower people directly. We think across the whole of the Northwest, there's around 10,000 social enterprises employing 200,000 people, contributing about £5 billion to the economy. Within Liverpool itself, we estimate there are several thousand social enterprises, about 50,000 jobs, and around £1 billion contribution to the local area. So we're not talking about small fry here. We're talking about something that's very significant and could be a real turbo, if it was turbocharged, a real engine for growth to support the recovery in Liverpool and the wider region. And I want to stress that point that they are businesses. These social enterprises sometimes are kind of mixed up with charities in the voluntary sector, but the evidence that we have is, these are businesses that are trading with the public, trading with other businesses, trading with the public sector sometimes, but it's about contracts, it's about revenue, it's not about grants, it's not about handouts, it's about helping people to build sustainable business models. Alongside that work around the green economy and focusing on that triple bottom line, there's also a lot of work being done to reach out and employ people from disadvantaged areas. So around 40% of the sector is looking to hire people from disadvantaged backgrounds, whether that's long-term unemployed, people with mental health issues, people with disabilities, physical and learning, whatever those happen to be, they are absolutely targeting on that, on those areas. And I think that comes to this point about a just transition. There is going to be jobs created out of the green economy and the greening of the economy. There are going to be opportunities, but how is that opportunity shared, and how do we make sure that people who most need it get the help they need? And I think that's where social enterprises come to the fore as a business model that can do that. They are optimistic, or at least they were optimistic before COVID. About 46% of social enterprises in that area wanted to hire more staff, to take more people on, create more jobs, and particularly true in those green sectors. And also 64% wanted or expected to grow in the next 12 months. This is a rapidly growing marketplace that we can get behind. I think that, in terms of success about the green economy, just trying to talk about why social enterprises and the green economy work so well together. I think, first of all, there's an issue around talent and entrepreneurship. Everybody has talent. Everyone has entrepreneur skills. But the problem is we often don't create those business models that enable them to do that. This idea that there are heroic entrepreneurs who can kind of change the world on their own is simply not borne out by reality. We need communities to get behind businesses. We need a large support network, and social enterprise help to do that. It's also about patience and commitment to places. You know, social enterprises, I think Annalisa Dodd said this recently in a speech, you know, the first in to go to places of deprivation and the last to leave it. And I think when it comes to the green economy and that transition, we need patient, consistent investment into changing places, into creating those jobs for the future. And social enterprises are doing that. And they're not going to go away because there's a quicker buck to be made somewhere else, or there's more profit to be made moving your business from Liverpool, say, to Singapore or wherever else around the world. They're committed to these places and they want to build their businesses there. And also the thing about innovation, I think this directly speaks to the green agenda. You know, when you look at things through a different lens, rather than just profit, when you look at the triple bottom line, as we call it in social enterprise, if you look at people, planet, and your financial sustainability, it encourages you to see things in different ways. And to take the Bulky Bob's example and the Furniture Reuse Centre up in Liverpool, you know, they create, yes, it's financially sustainable, but the reason they've done the model they've done is because they wanted to find a way to both have an environmental impact, so directly to contribute to recycling and reuse, but also to help these people in poverty as well. And that, you know, I don't think there are many people who would have sat down and thought that going around businesses and places in the region, taking disused beds, disused furniture, remaking them, hiring people from disadvantaged backgrounds to do that, and then selling those on, that's not something that people is going to strike people if they're looking at things through a traditional lens. And there are opportunities there to be had. In terms of the barriers, just wrapping up now, I mean, I think first of all, there's an issue about finance. You know, when we talk to our social enterprises in Liverpool and in the area, they want equity, they want flexible, sustainable finance. They don't want to be chucked loans and guarantees and so on, which, you know, put debt on the balance sheet and inhibit their growth in the future. You know, they want those kind of equity style products that are going to back them as a venture and help them to grow and innovate. And I would pay tribute to Steve Rosborough here for launching the Kindred Fund with Power to Change, for example. That's an example of the innovation we need to see more of. And I think government needs to devolve more funding to the mayor, to those local authorities, so they can work with businesses to create those funds. But we need more of it. As I said at the beginning, this is a sector of billions of pounds. You know, a few £1 million here and there is not going to turbocharge it. We're talking about tens, hundreds of millions of pounds of investment that's required over the next decade. On procurement as well, I know Steve and other local authorities have been doing great work here around social value and trying to maximise the social and environmental opportunities that come from public procurement. You know, social enterprises are very keen to engage with government around that, but we do need to find more consistent measures of environmental and green kind of performance. A lot of it's basically very lowest common denominator stuff. You know, it's how many, you know, how many tons of plastic are you recycling? You know, what's your carbon emissions? Are you reducing those? Very important. But when we talk about that just transition, for example, it's not just about carbon and plastic. It's about green jobs and green skills. It's about creating green spaces for people, air pollution, transportation. It's a whole range of other factors. And I think at the moment, we're really just scratching the surface of what procurement can do. And finally, around tax, if I can just briefly talk about that. We found during COVID, actually, the lack of tax and support that's available to social enterprises in the green sector and beyond. 70% of social enterprises don't receive any form of business rates relief, for example. So even though they're here for the community, they're contributing, they're hiring people, they're reinvesting those profits, the current national framework for taxation does not recognise that. Similarly, on corporation tax, you know, we've just seen the Chancellor announce increases in that. But, you know, if you're a Serco or a Capita or whatever it is, you pay the same amount of corporation tax as, say, Home Baked in Anfield, the community land trust there, which is, you know, selling pies outside the ground at Anfield. Yeah, that can't be right. And, you know, it's inhibiting their growth. It's reducing their investment opportunities because, you know, social enterprises are reinvesting their profits back into communities. They need to be able to repay investors out of their profits. But if you're taxing those at the same rate as you are other companies, you're reducing the opportunities for them to repay those investors and access that capital. So tax and capital is really heavily linked. And also national insurance as well. We're talking about green jobs. You know, if you're an Oxbridge graduate or someone went to a Russell Group University like me, you know, an employer pays the same amount of national insurance for you as a worker as, say, somebody who's been unemployed for 10 years or somebody who's got a mental health challenge or someone who's just come out of prison or an ex-care leaver. And again, that can't be right. You know, social enterprises are investing, supporting those people into jobs, but it is expensive to train people. It does cost money to give them wraparound support, and we need a tax system that recognizes that and backs that. So I think, you know, if we could tackle those issues around finance, tax and procurement, I think we could really turbocharge this. But I want to leave you with a very optimistic message, I think, which is, you know, the people and entrepreneurs of the Liverpool City region, those social entrepreneurs are doing fantastic work. There are hundreds of businesses out there, thousands across the whole region that are waiting to kind of get support from there. And if we can unlock that creativity and talent, I've got absolute confidence that we can hit the 2030 target around cutting business emissions significantly that the IPCC has recommended. So I want to leave on that optimistic note, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Andrew. I think you raised some really important points, particularly around tax, but also about the wealth of social enterprises that we have in the city, because they are both, committed to and embedded in our communities. So thank you, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for you when we get to that stage. But Steve Rotherham has now joined us, guys, so maybe I'm going to hand back over to Steve, who can then give us an update on budget. So Steve, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, great stuff. Okay, I've had some IT problems as we are all wrestling with technological issues over the last 12 months or so. I'll if you want, follow on from what was just previously said in some instances. By the way, it's great, isn't it, when we can have people who will independently verify some of the things that we're saying as a combined authority. And that is that in many of the instances, we are leading now the whole country in inclusive growth and community wealth building. In the stuff that was just mentioned around distribution of funding, Kindred is one such example, about our socially trading organisations, about our fair employment charter, and pulling all that together so that we can create that more fair and socially just society that we all want. And so that is in stark contrast, isn't it, to what happened in the budget, in all honesty. And I understand that any chancellor will want to protect the economy in the short term, and extending things like furlough, it has to be said, until September, is something that I'd support. I'm glad that it's not the furlough light that was proposed when it was just the north, but I do think that we need to, wherever we can, prop up the hardest hit sectors, because the best way that we'll get through the next period into recovery, and then I want to get to growth, is by protecting as many businesses and then enabling them or giving them the opportunity to survive and then hopefully flourish. I think there was some good stuff in it, about Southport Town Centre, which is really good, and we've got ambitious plans for Southport Town Centre ourselves, working with Pleasureland and expanding that whole cultural offer, because we don't just want people to come to Liverpool City Centre. Of course we do, but we want them also to have a look at some of the other jewels in the crown that we have in the Liverpool City region, to go over to West Carey Beach, or to go to New Brighton, or of course to go to Southport. But you can go to Knowsley Safari Park, and you can go to other areas where we've got some great cultural offers. So we want that to be successful. There was also news about Freeport status, and whilst at this moment in time, on the face of it, it looks like Freeport status might be a good thing. I've set out some very clear red lines in terms of workers' rights, pay and conditions, and also of environmentally and regulatory protections. We just want some comfort that they won't be undermined, because we're not going to accept a race to the bottom, and I'd rather not have it than it being used as a tool to undermine what we're trying to achieve outside of the Freeport. And all of those things, I think, are starting to reflect the way in which we want to take our city region, and the things that we've been lobbying government for. However, it has to be said that the budget overall really fell short of anything approaching the long-term economic plan for recovery. The first thing we need to do is to invest in our public services, and I've been saying since last year that there won't be any economic recovery without properly funded local authorities. And there is a danger in thinking that because our councils did receive some emergency funding during COVID, that they're now free from the burden of austerity. We hear the Chancellor and others continually standing up saying they're giving more money out. Well, actually what they did, if you remember, he said, whatever it takes. Our councils then did whatever it took. but then only got a fraction of the money that they'd expended doing whatever it took. And so the Chancellor needs to put that right first. And our councils in the Liverpool City region have had one of the largest collective cuts in the whole country over the austerity years. And if recovery is to actually provide some hope, we must first of all secure their future. And projects, you know, why do we need councils? Well, those areas where councils haven't been hit, they have an advantage because projects like housing and transport and infrastructure and, you know, all of the things that they do, they require local authority capacity. We need officers who can get these things through the sausage machine more quickly. And quite frankly, most of our councils now don't have the number of officers in planning and economic development and regeneration. You know, those sorts of things that we can really start to use to get through this very difficult period. And those delays mean that we've got an even bigger uphill struggle than we already have, because other areas in the country haven't faced the same continual year-on-year cuts and erosion to their council tax base and their grant from central governments that others have. So I was disappointed, in all honesty. I'm not just saying that as a party political point. I was disappointed that the Chancellor had almost nothing to say about what we can do, and some of the ways in which the funding is going to be distributed actually the opposite of devolving more power away from Whitehall. It's, you know, areas like ours have been taking steps to boost our local economy because we've had some devolution, and the government seem that they've gone cold on devolution and now taking more back into central government, and central government deciding what's best for areas. And look, levelling up is a joke. It's impossible to level anything up if what you do is put more into areas that are already at a higher level than the areas that need to be dragged up. And you won't level any economic imbalances in the country. All it'll do is exacerbate inequality. The community renewal fund is the same as that. It won't renew communities. You can't do it from a top-down governance perspective. It doesn't work. We've seen that year after year, decade after decade, with central governments thinking that they can do it for us. You can't. You need a strategic overview. That's why devolution is so important, and for me it still is. And we provided the governments with the opportunity, really, if they were truly about levelling up, to demonstrate that. We submitted our evidence-based economic recovery plan to government 8 months or so ago. We're still waiting for the government to provide real feedback and the funding that for that £1.4 billion of investment, UK PLC would get £8.8 billion in return. And genuinely, if you go to any private investor and say you're going to get those sorts of returns, they bite your hands off. So it's really, really disappointing. And also the budget gave very few new announcements really to inspire and support things like a green recovery. We need that Green New Deal, and you know, we've got a green industrial revolution coming. Why aren't the governments working through devolved areas to say what might this mean? How can we take a lead, not just in this country but globally? And there's lots and lots of things that we put forward that they haven't really responded to. So going forward, we should have devolution by default in this country and not an add-on, which is what's happened. And at times, local areas have been, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of governments. And you know, if you want to look at how they can get a bigger bang for the buck, it's by working through areas and not doing to areas, because it's failed. And then lastly, my heart goes out to the 3 million people who have been excluded from government support at all since last March. 12 months now without anything, without a penny at all. And the government did do something, certainly not enough, but they did do something about recognising around 600,000 people who have now got their first year under the belt, if you like, of providing accountants records. So that's good, but as I say, you can't support some viable businesses, the government call them, but allow a larger proportion of viable businesses to go to the wall. You can't protect the income of some people but not of others. It's just that divide and rule, divide and conquer again that we see far too often. And if you want an example of where governments can do stuff, have a look at how they wasted billions of pounds on failed contracts, while squabbling with hard-working entrepreneurs about small change really to what some of the size of those contracts were. So I just think they deserve better, and I'm going to continue with a lot of people on this call now who are going to continue to fight for those people. And Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone's got any.
Thanks, Steve. And again, you raised some really valid points in terms of the budget, not supporting the public sector who have pulled out all of the stops in the last 12 months to support, those most vulnerable. You mentioned about the excluded not having anything. And I look forward to hearing more about the status of the free port and how it can benefit our region, particularly in terms financially and terms of jobs growth. No one's put anything in the chat yet, Steve, in terms of any questions for you. So, and I can't see everybody on the screen in terms of hands. Does anybody have any questions for Steve in terms of his feedback on the budget or free ports? Can you see any hands, Steve Barwick?
No, sorry.
Okay then, Steve, you got off quite lightly there then, mate. So what we'll do is that we will move back to our presentations and we will move on to Chris Warhurst from Warwick Institute for Economic Research and author of the Green Job Vacancies in LCR. So Chris, over to you. And again, we've got 7 minutes to present to us. Thanks so much.
Chair, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. My institute, IER, Institute for Employment Research at Warwick, does lots of applied research for the UK government and other governmental bodies like the ILO and the EU and the OECD. And at the moment, like everybody, we're trying to focus some of our attention on the Prime Minister's Green Industrial Revolution that he announced in November. And I think there's a kind of few hard truths that we need to appreciate about that agenda, which is there's lots of talk about green industrial revolutions, circular economies, sustainable economies, but actually we do not have a definition of what those things are. So we don't know what they look like. We don't know the current size of that economy. We don't know if it's got potential for growth. We don't know if it's growing or even shrinking because of COVID. There have been attempts to try and define a sector, and that's usually the kind of low carbon and environmental goods and services sector. And within that, there might be different industries. But that's a kind of purist model. It's looking for those, green jobs, which are only to do with things to do with green industries and focused on and using particularly green skills. And the problem with that approach is it's quite blunt. And it doesn't really allow anybody to measure the real number of jobs. What they typically do is extrapolate how many jobs might be in the green economy by looking at things like productivity data and sales data and saying, well, if you're making so many sales in a company, you must have so many workers. Or if your productivity is such and such, you must have so many workers. And it doesn't really count for the kind of variation that might exist in green jobs. So you could, for example, have green occupations in green industries. You could have green occupations in what we might call the old brown industries. In the same way that the creative industries now, when they talk about creative jobs, talk about jobs which are creative, but not in the creative industries. So for example, web designers working in NHS trusts are classed as creative jobs, but they're not in the so-called creative industries. They're not in film and TV and things. And also you may have a situation where the old brown jobs are greening, even if they're staying in the brown in the old brown industries. So there's a kind of lots of different possibilities. And what we've been trying to do with colleagues at Strathclyde University is try and develop some kind of typology of jobs. And when we were looking at the Liverpool City Region, we looked at three things. One is there's new and emerging jobs which are specifically in the green economy, so the new jobs. We looked at existing jobs which are becoming greener because the kind of tasks that they're doing are changing, and that might be some people like financial analysts. And then we looked at the stock of existing jobs which, because of demand of the green economy, might be expanding. So these could be electricians, for example. It's an old job, but more of them might be needed as we switch over to sustainable electrical supplies. So we looked at the Liverpool City Region in terms of these jobs, and a couple of things which are worth flagging here. In terms of demand by occupation, Liverpool City Region, if you divide it up into high skill occupations, intermediate occupations, low skill occupations, Liverpool City Region is more or less where the UK is in terms of the number of these occupations, these green occupations at high and intermediate skills. So in other words, managers, professionals and skilled workers. There are less jobs in Liverpool in the low skilled occupations like factory operatives. Now, in one sense, that's the first good news story. It might be that as the economy greens, the stock of jobs in Liverpool shuffles up the skills hierarchy. So we're creating more intermediate and high-skilled jobs and less low-skilled jobs. When we look at demand by industry, there's something quite interesting. Remember, we're looking at existing jobs that are greening as well as green jobs. We find that Liverpool City Region's got more of those jobs in the hospitality industry, and less, ironically, in the utilities, including gas, water and sewage, which are important, of course, in the greening of the economy, and less in IT. When we look at the type of skills that employers want, they tend to look for, when they're recruiting for new workers in these jobs, they're looking for existing experience and what we might call transversal skills, skills which are general across different occupations and industries. There's actually very little demand for pure green skills in the Liverpool labour market at the moment. So, things like environmental protection or in renewables. The other good news story, I think, though, is in pay. What we find is that in Liverpool City Region, as across the UK generally, there is higher pay in green job vacancies than in non-green job vacancies. Although that gap between them, between the pay levels, has narrowed during COVID-19. The other thing I think we need to say about this is potentially there is a third good news story, which if you take all this together, the kind of occupations which are being advertised and created, the types of pay which is being offered, it might be that there's an improvement over time as Liverpool City Region greens to more high quality jobs. And that's something which is flagged in the Building Back Better documents. The UK government wants to create more high quality jobs. What we're seeing potentially in the greening of the economy in Liverpool and the UK generally is jobs which have higher pay, they're higher skilled, and there are fewer lower skilled jobs. So that, as I say, there may be a rise overall in the stock of job quality in the Liverpool City Region. I think we have to say, though, and acknowledge that it's not a huge increase in those higher and higher paid jobs, but there is some change. But there's an element of caution here. Liverpool has got less of the purest green jobs than the rest of the UK. So what it's got a good stock of, and there's lots of demand for, are the old brown jobs which are greening. And now that suggests something I think Liverpool needs to look at for the future, which is they might need to think about stimulating demand around both green jobs and brown jobs, which might be greening. So that means a plan. And it seems to me that there are two or three things which Liverpool might think about. One is how they might attract new green jobs. And secondly, how they might help existing green jobs and employers adapt and transform those jobs to be greener. Now that I think needs some coordination between local governments, employers, training providers, and it needs to be underpinned by good data, so everybody knows what they're talking about and knows where they're heading to. And one possible model for that, and it's something that Liverpool City Region might look at, is the new hub approach in Liverpool, where they've got what might be called a skills ecosystem, where they get everybody involved, trade unions, employers, training providers, local government, researchers, into one room together to talk about and try and coordinate what their needs are and what the resources are to try and push forward and create a greener future for Scotland. And that might be something that the Liverpool City Region might consider.
Thank you so much, Chris, and almost on time. So thank you so much for that. And I really appreciate the fact that you've touched on working closely with trade unions in terms of the move to greener jobs and identifying the fact that, you know, as a region, we don't have any of those purer jobs, but the fact that these green new jobs do pay high wages. And I think that's something to bear in mind as we move forward and build back better. Thanks, Chris. I'm going to move over now to Charlie Whitford, Associate Director of the MTC, who are the sponsors of this group. So over to you, Charlie, and 7 minutes. Thank you.
Sure. Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair and members of the APPG, for inviting me to speak today. The MTC is a non-profit distributing research technology organisation and part of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. Our purpose is to create a significant positive impact on society by enabling product-based businesses to generate zero carbon economic growth and people to develop skills and knowledge. It's clear we face huge challenges and even crises: Brexit, COVID recovery, fuel poverty and climate change. It is well recognised by both government and industry that developing modern digital production approaches improve productivity, reduce waste, reduce carbon, and improve health and safety and well-being for us and our environment. But both markets and suppliers still struggle to adopt these approaches at scale due to significant barriers. However, if we effectively address these barriers, then we can collectively convert challenges of crisis level into opportunities for businesses, people, and our communities, and also reduce social inequalities. We have seen real opportunities to create jobs in a green economy missed in the past. Historically, only a quarter of the life cycle cost of UK's wind farms was spent within the UK. This has only increased in more recent times to 43%, which now faces the added challenge of mature overseas competition. We have also missed an opportunity to deliver a green economy in our domestic housing market. We're still under-delivering homes, and now, inexcusably, there are more homes in the UK that require retrofit solutions to meet our climate targets than there were when the Climate Act of 2008 was passed. There are identifiable future market-based opportunities for a green recovery in our region: hydrogen, tidal, free ports and housing, to name a few. The challenges to convert these opportunities into green jobs are similar across sectors: fragmented pipelines, perceived market constraints, a lack of supply chain coordination, and an absence of leadership and the skills industry requires. These factors continue to undermine investor and business confidence and lead to suboptimal growth. We need to provide coordination across supply and demand, working together with the private sector. The proposal for the National Centre of Excellence in Modern Methods of Construction, the MTC, is now working with the Combined Authority seeks to address this. On the subject of housing, a matter the APPG has discussed previously, I would like to thank the members for their letter to the Housing Minister last year. As a result of this and the support for the project from the Metro Mayor, the Chancellor Exchequer asked in December for the submission of a full business case for the National Centre. It will deliver a sector capable of producing greener, high quality and more affordable homes. This business case is now being developed for submission in April with the input of MHCLG and BEIS. We're also pleased that the proposal was specifically identified in the budget announcements last week as being ambitious. In addition to housing benefits, there's also an opportunity to provide the supply chain with the tools and capabilities to deliver in sectors with high market confidence. And with the demand for modern approaches at scale, there is an opportunity to inspire young people into these sectors with the introduction and demand for digital, green and clean assembly-based skills at all levels. To achieve this requires foresight, it requires commitment, clarity, collaboration and coordination, as well as leadership. We commend the Metro Mayor and his team for their commitment to delivering a National Centre of Excellence in our region, and also the Mayor's commitment to collaboration. And we are talking to colleagues across other regions about how our projects will work together, with our Mayor identifying that it's not only important for the Liverpool City Region, but for the UK as a whole. And to make it work, we need to be working at scale. We really do see a future with a green economy and with the skills to compete on a global stage. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Charles, and really interested that MHCLG and BIS are behind some of those initiatives. I'm going to bring in now Bill Esterton, who has a question. Sorry, Bill, I missed you out. He's got a question for Steve, because Steve has to go at 1 o'clock. So over to you then, Bill.
Thanks, Kim. Great to see you in the chair, and look forward to the way you're going to run the APPG. Thanks to everybody for really great insights and contributions. Just a couple of thoughts on the budget, really, and firstly on free ports and what Steve said. I'm pleased you took a robust approach there, Steve, about making sure that they are not an excuse to undermine rights and pay, and indeed environmental standards. We had a free port, didn't we, in 2012? The then government closed it, and the evidence the Treasury demonstrated was that it didn't provide benefits to the economy. So I think we would be only doing our duty if we made sure we could see what the benefits of having a free port are, and that there wasn't detriment along the way. And I think, to Kim, your point about trade unions, I'd want to see trade union involvement in the development of any free port for the reasons Steve set out. But we also need to be very mindful of some of the evidence around the world that you see free ports used just to move jobs, to take advantage of lower standards and lower pay, and that they are opportunities for tax dodging of one sort or another, and indeed for money laundering. So I hope that, and I'm sure that a great deal of care is going into any detailed proposal. And then the second point, really, to what Judith, you said, which was about the budget and the incentives for manufacturing.
Sorry, Bill, can I just interrupt 1 minute? Can I just maybe take questions for Steve specifically, only because he's got to go at 1 o'clock, and I know that Margaret and Mary have questions as well. Is that okay?
It is, but I've got to go at 1 as well. So
okay, then go on.
I'll make this point very briefly then, which is that the problem with the budget moves on investment they are very skewed towards the largest manufacturers who own their own plant and machinery. For SMEs who lease or rent, there's no benefits to be made, and they are only geared really at businesses that have got cash or access to large scale investment. So I'd like to see us pushing for that investment in SMEs as well, because without SMEs, we're not going to get that support for greening the economy. You can't do it with just large firms. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Bill. Mary and then Margaret, and maybe you can keep your questions possibly as brief as possible so we can get them in, so Steve has an opportunity to answer them before he has to leave. Thanks. Mary, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, I need to leave at 1. But we need more effort from government. You know, we've seen that they're not giving enough priority to housing. We know the housing that we've got need retrofitting. We've got glass manufacturers. They're turning down applications for grants to replace inefficient double glazing, and we make glass here. It's just the government is not focused, and it's not getting down to what needs doing, and yet they refuse to set up like national skills task force. They refuse to look at what is needed for the future and where we're going, so that, and then we can skill up. I think Steve and City Region is doing what it can, but it needs more from the top, and we need the employers as well to invest.
Thank you, Mary. Margaret?
Thanks very much, Kim. And just my question very quickly for Steve is, in the UK, we've got 9 million adults who are functionally illiterate. I don't know what the figure is for the city region, but it's going to be, you know, these are huge numbers on a national scale. So for those people, you know, if we want to just transition, we have to make sure that those people can have education. They can be supported in developing their reading skills, their confidence, their literacy, their numeracy skills, and digital skills. And that education needs to be free, because most of the time those people, you know, are on very low incomes. And I'm just wondering, you know, what we're going to do across the Liverpool City region to address what is a very profound social injustice in relation to those people.
Thank you, Margaret. Steve, you've got 7 minutes to answer all of those questions. Thank you.
Starting now, Bill's absolutely right that we've had something called free port status previously, but I've had a car, and a car can be many different colours, shapes, can have different wheels on it and different specifications. So just because it's called a free port, it doesn't mean it's the same as what we've previously had, and that's part of the problem. We haven't had the details of what it is, Bill. So all we've done is got over the first of the hurdles. The Chancellor can announce it as that we've got free port status all he wants. We haven't, and nobody else in the country has. All you've gone is through to the next round of your application for free port status, and you've got to develop a full business case. And within that, some of the concerns that you've raised, that which are absolutely the right sort of things that we have to get clarity on, but one of them will be around displacement. What's the point in having free port status when actually net you don't create any further jobs, and all you do is move them from one area to the next? So all of those concerns, believe me, Bill, we are 100% talking to government about to get some comfort that that's not the case. But the other one is you talked about trade unions. Our trade unions have been part of the stakeholder group developing the bid as we've gone along from day one, and I won't go any further with the business case without the full support of our trade unions. But actually, if we were to get it right, and don't forget, what happened previously is that the bit that attaches the river was called the free port. This is nothing like that. There are tax zones which are in the Wirral, St Helens, and in Halton. So it's not just about what happens where the port of Liverpool is, it's about what happens across the whole of the city region. And as other areas are getting these free port status awarded to them, for instance, Tees Valley, who are desperate for it, we have to be careful not to be left behind, because that could also suck stuff into the northeast rather than it being here in the northwest. So I'm very cognizant of what the possibilities are. For Mary, on housing retrofit, if you have a look at our economic recovery plan that we sent into government, part of that is around housing retrofit, but also about the modern methods of construction. And we just heard briefly about how we can do things differently, which obviously has the savings of the reduction in waste when we construct them. But those sort of, I'm reluctant to say prefabricated because they've got connotations of what happened after the war, but those factory designed and constructed homes, they can be of a really high standard and a high specification in regard to what's called the U value, which is the heat loss. And we want to retrofit areas, certainly working class areas, where you're more likely to get people who live in houses where they've got single glazing, where they've got 9-inch brick walls, solid construction walls, where they've got no loft flagging. But also we want to look at hydrogen boilers and a whole host of things. We've put proposals in for 6,500 to trial it right the way across the city region, waiting on the government to do something about it. You mentioned Glass Futures. I think it's something that we should bring to this APPG to explain how we could really help the carbon reduction targets with energy intensive industries by Glass Futures working, because if it works as a pilot, it'll work in glass and then every other industry, and we could be again a world leader in this. And then just to let you know, we're working across our patch, but also with Cheshire and Warrington and Manchester, but also potentially sort of the north of Wales, Kent Skaters area. And we're hoping to bring that together to go to COP26 to have a really comprehensive offer from this geographical area, which makes more sense than the individual administrative areas, because there's a lot of stuff that we can do. On Margaret's point about illiteracy, Margaret, we've failed generations of people. I'm afraid that we can't, even us as socialists, we can't stand back and defend some of the things that are indefensible, and allowing kids to go through 11 years of education and to come out who are illiterate, something in the system is failing it. It's not our teachers, because our teachers are doing brilliant jobs despite everything that's happening. For me, it's all around DFE. I think they're the worst departments in all of government, and we need to shake them up a little bit. We need some more devolution, and you could expect that I'm going to say that. But look, we've seen, haven't we, that when decisions are taken more locally, they are better for those areas. Now, whilst you have a national system and a national curriculum, of course, that still needs to exist, but we do need some local derogation and devolution so that we can do things better, and then we can respond to the challenges we've got. But we then have to pick up that failure in the system, because those people who are no less talented than anywhere else in the country, but are failed by a lack of opportunity. So we want to use our adult education budget, of which we didn't get an increase this year, surprisingly, by governments, but we're going to use that, and we're doing test and learn pilots to find out how we can engage people back into education, perhaps give them the first foothold on the first rung of a career ladder. But MVQ level 1s for some people might be their target, and that's brilliant, because what we do is we give them the opportunity of lifelong learning, and everybody on this call will at some stage have benefited from somebody giving them a second chance. And that's what we want to do. We want to give hope to people right the way across the city region that they can go on to fulfill that full potential. And I'll be fighting the government all the way. And at a future date, I will bring back a report, Chair, on what Sir Paul Grant is doing, who is a Scouser, went to work in London, did very well for himself. He's one of the what people would call a superhead, did stuff on the London Challenge, blah, blah, blah. He's bringing it back here to the Liverpool City region. And again, we're going to have a strategic overview of all the educational and skills needs. And then we'll be able to really start to tackle those problems around literacy and numeracy that have existed far too long. And with that, Chair, I have got to go. I think I just squeezed that in.
You did, Steve. Thank you so much for answering all those questions very succinctly and effectively. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day, and see you very soon. Can I go over now to Dame Judith, who I know Bill had a question for. Dame Judith?
Yeah, but I can answer very quickly, Bill. We were talking on it this morning in our meeting about that very issue of capital investment versus leasehold, and the fact that the super allowance is very much focused on large business rather than small. It's on our radar. We are already making the point into government and are pushing hard on that one.
Thanks, Judith. Thanks, Kim. I must go.
Thank you, Bill. Sorry, had to rush. We have a question. Baroness Hooper wanted to ask a question about trade and export. Ooh.
Thank you. Yes, and I think my question is probably more directed to Dame Judith, but anybody else who wants to jump in. To start at the beginning, I was not in favour of Brexit. And having been the MEP for Liverpool, obviously it comes into that. But I do think one of the consequences of Brexit is that we are looking, or the government is looking, to sharpen up our trading and exports. And the Department for International Trade is really looking for opportunities that will involve businesses throughout our country, and particularly small and medium-sized businesses. And I have been asked to be one of these trade envoys, which, as you know, is an unpaid job, but to help to accelerate whatever the official people in the department are doing. And I am covering 3 Latin American countries. Now, Liverpool has huge historic links with Latin America, shipping and all the rest of it. But the green agenda is very much a focus in all these countries. Costa Rica, for example, is apparently the most advanced country in the world on green, on progress to the green targets. So I would like to know if any of the businesses and manufacturing in particular in Liverpool would be interested in building links with these Latin American countries in order to increase their potential for exports. And UK Export Finance is now there and ready to help to support any such ventures. But examples for successful green initiatives are really being looked for. And I think there are huge opportunities. So I just wanted to make the point that although I'm no longer directly involved in Liverpool, I still I would like to see lots of links between Liverpool and Latin America build up.
Thank you so much, Baroness Hooper. Great question. And I know that you directed it towards Dame Judith, but if any of the other speakers would like to contribute also, then feel free. Thank you, Dame.
I can certainly speak a few words about it. I think there's a few elements to it. I think, first of all, you know, the UK is, as Judith says, you know, and the Liverpool City Region as well, you know, a huge amount of manufacturing talent. And I think what we need to be doing is to, you know, getting ourselves high up the value chain as much as possible. You know, from our experience at Social Enterprise UK, and social enterprises are actually, even though we're seen as kind of, yeah, charity fluffy businesses, we're more likely to be exporting than normal businesses are. And I think that's partly because the challenges are global, particularly around the environment, and people recognize the need to get out there and change the world. But coming back to that point around the value chain, you know, there's a huge global middle class emerging in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, and these middle class people want to have access to ethically sourced, environmentally responsible, sustainable products and socially impactful products as well. So there's a huge opportunity to link the social economy in the UK globally around the world, and that's what we're seeing, a lot of partnerships developed. And I suppose what I would say to Baroness Hooper is that, you know, the business models do matter. You know, I think the reason, you know, the reason why we have so many more social enterprises exporting overseas is because they want to get out there and make relationships with people, and they attend more events internationally, and they're prepared to go to kind of places in South America. I can think of a number of social enterprises, Cafe Direct, for example, Elvis and Cressy and others, who are taking fair trade or responsible recycled products to Latin America. And, you know, they're willing to put themselves out there. I think in this country, unfortunately, we do have a cultural problem with going out and selling ourselves overseas and learning those languages and so on. So it's not all about government, it's about the forms of businesses that we're backing. And if we backed more social enterprises, I can guarantee the Baroness that we would have more exports in Latin America than we would be with business as usual. And a second point just around export finance, and it kind of links into that, and I know I picked this up with Bill Estes and others, you know, again, we've got a very traditional looking export finance regime, you know, and it's very much looking at traditional sectors. I don't think it's taking enough opportunity at those green sectors. So I know there's a number of social enterprises who've tried to get access to, you know, export finance guarantees, for example, on issues around recycled products. You know, I think it was recycled leather goods in one setting, and they just didn't understand it. They didn't understand what the business model was. They were like, we don't understand. You're taking this stuff which feels like junk effectively, and then you're kind of repackaging it and reselling it. You know, who's going to buy that? It feels very risky, even though it's been a successful global brand for a number of years. So I do think there is a cultural shift that needs to be taken within the UK export finance regime to recognise that it's not just about green manufacturing and making wind turbines and, you know, or digital parts. There's the whole greening of all forms of business, retail, hospitality, everything. You know, green glass is another area I could go on about for ages. You know, we've been seeing huge innovations in that area. And I don't think UK Export Finance gets that. I don't think Bays gets that either. So happy to take that offline and talk more about that. But what I can say, yes, is, you know, forms of business, that patience, dedicated support into that is really important.
Thank you. I'll make you one of my contacts, if I may.
Can I add a few bits? Just we've talked about digitalization of manufacturing, and as we're developing that capability, we're doing it with industry. We're, as well as exporting products and working with Latin America, for example, in that area, we're also doing a lot of work where we're exporting our capabilities. So, for example, around the green agenda, the ability to process products closer to the source and reduce the amount of transportation of products between supply chain components is a big area of growth. An example of that is the ability to use deployed remote managed manufacturing and processing, where we're working with Colombian coffee producers at the moment. So these are actual projects underway, and being actually that particular example was initially developed through the Newton Fund and is now being invested specifically by the companies in Colombia to support their manufacturing at base, but also using our capabilities back in the UK. So there's a win-win from a green economy perspective there as well.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles.
Can I just say something as well?
Chris.
Just a note of caution in this, that we need to make a couple of distinctions. There's been some initiatives which have been recorded in Hansard, where the government have put funding, UK government put funding into the creation of green jobs. And those green jobs have been created, but they've been created by British firms overseas. And so we need to make a really important distinction to make sure, first of all, just to echo Judith's point before about we should be domesticating some of our manufacturing, and COVID has shown that the importance of that. But the distinction we need to make is between wanting to export goods and services which are green and not export our green jobs. What we want to be doing is making those green goods and services in the UK, and if we can, be able to try and encourage those kind of jobs into the Liverpool City region.
Thanks. Great point there, Chris. Thank you. Judith, do you have anything further that you'd like to add?
Just to say that I think there are three important elements to this. One, which I mentioned in my speaking earlier on, is I think we are in the short term dealing with, in manufacturing industry particularly, getting used to a new and inevitably more difficult set of trading arrangements with our nearest neighbours. And I don't think we are at the end of that yet. We are still operating within temporary arrangements. There's a lot more to come in terms of bureaucracy that we're going to have to get to deal with. I think that is going to drive manufacturers and, as Andrew says, other sectors to think about trading more broadly, because our nearest neighbours are not so easy to deal with and trade with anymore. And it may be as easy to trade more broadly. So I think there will be opportunities and people will start to look to export and trade further afield. But for me, the other and equally important part of all of this is that we have to support British manufacture at home.
Mm-hmm.
In the meeting I was in earlier this morning, people were saying, you know, we are one of the fairest countries in the world. And that means we are we are absolutely diligent in terms of encouraging imports from other places. Lots of other countries in the world support their basic homemade manufacturing and other sectors more than overseas. And I think you have to do all three. We have to be exporters, we have to be outward looking globally, but we also have to see more government support for indigenous manufacturing and services and using those in the UK.
Thank you, Judith. And you make, I think, a really valid point about maintaining manufacturing in this country, because we've seen throughout this pandemic, some of our well-established companies trying to shift production outside of the country. Rolls-Royce is a prime example. So I think that is a pertinent point that you make. So I don't think we have any more questions from anybody, so I think we'll wind up. And according to my agenda, I've been asked to ask the presenters if they want to say final word before we finish. So, Chris, do you have anything to say? You've got a minute.
Yes, I would. I mean, one thing which I think is very important, and Liverpool City Region needs to think about this, is a strategy. And I've called it a plan before, but the UK government doesn't have a labour market strategy. I think the Liverpool City Region needs to have a labour market strategy, of which the green industry is, and the greening of its economy has to be an important part.
Thanks, Chris. Charles, final last word before we conclude.
Just that we've got some really good opportunities around some of the key markets that I've highlighted, and I think there is a strong strategy from a regional perspective, and the coordination between supply chain, markets, technology organisations is really the strength in that. And with that, we've got a real opportunity, and I welcome the opportunity to discuss it with any members of the group as we progress this business case before submission in April.
Thank you so much, Charles. Andrew?
Just one point, really. I don't think we touched on this in this call so far, but just I think there's a lot of a focus on the green agenda around technologies. We hear a lot about, we must get hydrogen, or we must get, battery technology, etc. I think we look back at things historically, but also presently. The technologies we need are already there, and a lot of social enterprises are doing them. To give one example, for example, the first solar-powered bus was created by a social enterprise in this country 10 years ago, 15 years ago, a Big Lemon in Brighton. What we lack is businesses don't see the point in doing that, because the returns are not immediate, they're long-term. And how do we get that cultural change that businesses decide we're going to take a 20, 30-year mindset? And that's where the problem really lies in this country. It's not about the technology. It's not about the creativity of our economy. We've got lots of that, and we create world-leading technologies all the time, but we don't exploit them through the private sector. And it's because of the culture and the structure of those businesses. So I think where Liverpool can take an advantage, because you've got such a strong social economy, is to really embed those principles into the businesses that you're investing in through the green revolution. Because if you invest in those businesses that have got that social environmental purpose embedded into them, they're going to stick around for a long time. You will see the results from that. My fear is that what we're looking at is a lot of gambling bets on different technologies, and building a park here, or a battery center there, or a hydrogen center there, or whatever, and just hoping it'll all trickle through the system. And we just know it will not happen. It will only happen if businesses feel obliged to take this issue seriously and invest in them, and to develop those jobs in the future. So what I would say is, more focus on business models and the types of businesses we're investing in, not just the technology. I think that could be something where Liverpool could really make advances, which other parts of the country are not doing.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And Dame Judith, would you like to have a final 1 minute say?
I think I'd end by supporting strongly what Andrew is saying, that I think if we see this as being all about technology, we will miss out on the great opportunities. This is about transforming business at every level and getting everyone to think about how we do what we do today better and greener and in a more digital space. And unless we make it inclusive in that way, I think we will miss out on some of those opportunities.
Oh, thank you, Dame Judith, and I'd like to thank all of the presenters for their contributions today, and everybody for attending the meeting. I think we've had a really interesting discussion and debate, but I truly believe, in terms of Liverpool City Region, has the skills, the know-how and the tenacity to make this happen. And I think the pandemic has shone a light and provided those great opportunities, and I really do believe that we have the opportunities to do that, because I think throughout the last 12 months, I think our city region has been placed on the world stage in terms of how we're doing things differently, and some really amazing initiatives are taking place across the region already. So I look forward to seeing further development. So well done, everybody. And I'd just like to say that the next meeting will take place the next meeting will take place after the elections on the 6th of May. So I'd just like to say thank you to everybody. Have a good day, and I look forward to seeing everybody very shortly. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.